Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's Monday afternoon, and I'm here for the next hour to talk to you, ladies and gentlemen from all over the globe, about Celtic and where we find ourselves moving into the week of Christmas. It is upon us. Paddy Lavery's been counting it down for about 6 months. Big shout out to Paddy and the Aberdeen boys in the chat. It's all about the chat. I'm going to throw some topics your way, and you can let me know what you think. Thankfully, this morning, we will be able to talk about the football. How good is that? Absolutely delighted with that. Yes, it was looking a little bit unconvincing for a few moments, let's just say. But I think there are green shoots of progress to be celebrated, to be discussed, to be used as a positive. But before we get on to that, let us know your thoughts about it. What are the reasons that Celtic are not able to put a team like Aberdeen to the sword the way we should have done? I mean, it was 3-1 going on 7-1, as Dano Slavo says there. But I think it was a similar situation against Dundee United at Tannadice, wasn't it? With regards to the fact that we created so many great chances, we were unable to capitalise on them, unfortunately. And then we were open, I think, to them maybe coming back, even though they wouldn't have deserved anything from the game. But they did come back in the second half, and they fully deserved it because we collapsed against Dundee United. We didn't collapse. When the pressure was on yesterday, we didn't collapse. We came back. We showed character. Resilience. We stuck to the game plan. What do you make of the game plan that Wilfred Nancy has set up for Celtic right now? Because I think you can split it right into two. This sounds pretty basic. It could be defensive and offensive. So, in an attacking sense, other than the fact that we don't have a lethal striker, we're doing quite a lot right, I think you will agree. The fact that there were 7 big chances and 5 moments where we hit the woodwork would suggest that someone is going to take a tanking one of these days, and hopefully it's a day soon. In relation to the defence, we're wide open far too often. That was capitalised on by Dundee United, and indeed for a moment yesterday by Aberdeen. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. It's always an absolute pleasure to join you on a Monday afternoon, and I'm running solo today. This happens from time to time, but I don't mind it at all. The reason I don't mind it is because it gives me more opportunity to bring the comments up that you are making throughout the 1 hour, as well as the game. The fact that Nancy's got his first win in the dugout. There are many other things to discuss, and we will discuss them. We always discuss every nuance of Celtic Football Club. So we need to talk about a number of different things. I'm going to start off by saying last night at a packed Gracie's on a Sunday night after the game. Brilliant mood, obviously, because Celtic put us in a good mood, as they often do, or otherwise. And we managed to bring Paul Elliot up to Glasgow. He's not here all that often. But it came to my mind, he's actually done a couple of interviews over the years on a Celtic State of Mind. One of them when we were just an audio podcast, and another one when we were speaking to a number of characters in the world of football. And it was back in the day when Amy Canavan, the wonderful, tremendous Amy Canavan, was doing a lot of interviews for a Celtic State of Mind, and she spoke to Paul Elliot. And these were great interviews, absolutely. And then recently I watched an interview that he did with Chris Sutton on the warm-up, and I thought it was phenomenal. Now, they ran through his entire career, which is a very interesting career. And there were moments during that interview that I just, as a Celtic fan, thought to myself, I wish we could have touched on this aspect of this subject, because obviously I'm doing it from a Celtic perspective. So I decided at that point to bring Paul up the road, and he was absolute class. Now, he's one of my favourite defenders in my time watching Celtic, and until the likes of Virgil van Dijk, etc., he was in my all-time great Celtic 11. So to finally meet him was a thrill in any case. The guy's class. He's absolutely class, and we'll be talking a wee bit more about his input. And hopefully I'll be able to do that with another good friend of mine in Quinny, or the Mighty Quinn, as he is known to his friends. There he is. And a wee bit
don't know if my friends would go along with that.
Well, the thing is, Quinny, a little bit like Celtic yesterday, we left it a bit late, but better late than never. We do want to focus on the performance, Quinny, because there's obviously a lot of discussion going on around the relationship and the connection or lack of between the fans and the board. I think we can pull all this in together today. We've got Aberdeen to talk about, right? The game. I've got Paul Elliot to talk about, and it is relevant to the board discussion. So I'll dive into that a little bit more. I think we need to give credit to the fans who came together before the game in a peaceful protest outside Celtic Park in their numbers to let those in charge of the football club know that we are unhappy and we're not going away. That again will be linked into Paul Elliott. And I think from last week, and I may have touched on this a couple of times, although I understand not everybody watches every day, so I want to go in a wee bit more depth about an opportunity for the club to be, the bigger person, if you like, to step down a little bit, Quinny, to compromise, to say, you know what, we want to hold out that olive branch to you, not the other way about, and we want to speak to the Celtic supporters. What is that opportunity? I hear you ask. Well, I'll be sharing that with you today, and I think it is a valid opportunity for the club to start to repair the damage that has been caused between the fans and the board. And obviously, at the moment, it doesn't look as though it's going to go anywhere. The club will be hoping that Wilfried Nancy goes on a winning run so that it masks a lot of the issues behind the scenes. But we do have January coming up, Quinny. And I'll tell you something, at the moment, it could go either way. January could go either way. We'll talk about that as well. Also want to talk about connections. The connection between a manager and his players, the connection between a manager and the fans. And sometimes, Quinny, right, and I'm going to start off with this because it is a positive. Sometimes there's a moment between a manager and the fan base, right? And I'm thinking Ronnie Dyla giving it the Ronnie roar up at Pittodrie. I'm thinking Ant Postecoglou punching his chest after a victory. And sometimes it's when you're in adversity and you come back and you win a game. That yesterday wasn't that game. We absolutely pounded Aberdeen from start to finish. We were a wee bit slack at the back for a moment and we let in a goal, and that's an issue that we're going to have to deal with. Yesterday wasn't that moment. That moment will come, Quinny, because at the moment it hasn't happened. That connection between Nancy and the fans where we're all in this together and we've got a victory. Sometimes that can make or break the mood music, if you like, of Celtic. And I've used the two examples previously. There's been others, of course. I think there was a moment in Neil Lennon's Celtic managerial career against Kilmarnock where they're beating us 3-0 at half-time and we're dead and buried. And later on, Neil Lennon has admitted that if he didn't come back that day, he was gone. You know, he was gone as a Celtic manager. We did come back. We drew 3 each. We win the league. We go on. And when we clinched the league, bizarrely enough, Quinny, that season, it was again at Rugby Park, and we absolutely destroyed Kilmarnock to the point, where the TV cameras are bouncing because of the Celtic fans giving it laldy, if you like. That's a Scottish term for anybody who isn't familiar with the vernacular. Anyway, let's talk about Aberdeen yesterday, Quinny. Give me your overview on it, because I'm splitting it very basically into defensive frailties versus real creativity up front without a striker to finish all the chances.
I think that the defensive frailty thing, I get, because the goal was very much like route one down the pipe sort of thing. But I really liked what I seen yesterday. I've been saying kind of on here on the Monday as well as on my place the last week or two. Like I've seen little bits. It's been really straw clutching, I think, for Nancy, and that's why some of the post-match comments he's had has been ridiculed, because it's like little segments of games, little passages of play. And the main thing, like, I went live the other day and it was like, has Nancy been sacked? Do you remember that day where it was like everything,
It happened live, Quinny. We were on when the tweet happened. Someone updated me via WhatsApp, which thankfully I've got my desktop. And when I brought it up, I did think this was it. I've got to admit, I didn't want, this is the thing. It wasn't like, oh, yes, we're going to get in a new manager. Because let me tell you, to bring in 4 different managerial teams in one season, it's not going to be easy for the squad of players. There's no guarantee whoever comes in is going to wave a magic wand. It could unsettle the team even more. So I would much rather be in the camp of Nancy starts winning games, buys over the players who maybe haven't bought in 100%, and then has that connection with the fans. I'd much rather that is the outcome here, Quinny.
Yeah. But I felt like when that was all happening last week, that there was lots of like, the Stevie Woods stuff, and he's told McKeown and Yang, get used to playing wing back, and there was just all these little threads of like disharmony, discontent, and for me, that's, you're talking about connection with the manager to players. That was the thing I was really questioning. Like, I could see that if it could work, like, or if he could work, what it would look like, and it would be good and stuff. But it was like, can he? Has he got the players on board? Will the players like dive in, the staff and everything else? But I think from what we've seen in the last match against Dundee United and into this game, there's more than enough to suggest there that he's got all the buy-in he needs from enough of the squad at this point. And again, I think the game yesterday just further highlights and crystallizes to all of us just the thing that we all know to be true, that the team is so far below the standard it should be. And again, you can imagine with some of these, when you lose, it's really straw clutching. But in a game like the Aberdeen one, the comment you had when I brought up was if we had a striker with the 171, you can then see like, okay, well, give this guy a striker. You know what I mean? And then give this guy a proper left and right side or whatever he thinks he's missing. And if he does have enough buy-in with enough of the team there, then it should get going. And it should be, ultimately, this is the one thing I kind of said on my match reaction last night, is again, we can go back through the annals of time on like the internet, that all the receipts are there. So many Celtic fans have been crying out for three at the back for the last however long you want to think about. And again, so many of them have said, especially when we re-signed Tierney, imagine a back three of Tierney and AJ and whoever else you want to play in between the three of them. And this is stuff that we've all kind of wanted for a while, and now it's kind of here at our doorstep. If the guy can work, then I think it will be brilliant where it will end up. So for me, Aberdeen really showed that the thing that we will never know because we're not in the building, the buy-in from the players and some sort of connection on the training ground where his ideas are getting implemented, and you know, you can see the cohesion kind of get going up the levels. Then I think, yeah, my kind of questions are kind of answered. I think he can do it. I think we back him. And I think from here, the only way is up.
You know, when we talk about these things, like you say, a few days later, and there's a wee bounce in our step, because winning does mask a lot of the deficiencies, a lot of the complaints, a lot of the frustrations. Absolutely does, Quinny. And I talk a lot to Jim Orr about this, right? And it takes me into another little thing, and it's not even a theory. It's just, I think when you're looking at every single aspect of Celtic every single day, you do start to see things that connect with other matters and things that affect other matters within the world of Celtic. And I think also when you're in real time, Quinny, sometimes it's hard to take that wee step back and say, right, why is this happening? And trying to be as balanced as possible. When I have been writing Celtic books, for example, I'm always looking back. Everything I've written, of course, is retrospective because it is non-fiction. It's you know, exactly right. So, but when you do it that way, you can start joining the dots as to why the wheels came off that season and why it didn't work out for a certain manager. When you're in it and you're watching it and you're at the game or you're covering the games, as we do, sometimes it's hard to actually see the wood for the trees, right? And it's only after the event you look back and say, right, I can understand why this didn't work and I can understand why that didn't work. So I'm trying to almost second guess that process, Quinny, and say to myself, right, if I'm 3 months down the line and I'm looking back at this situation, what am I pointing to at that point? Removing the emotion. Because like you say, you watch games often after the event, as I do, to try and make sense of a performance going well or otherwise, and you're taking your own opinion on why that happened. And it's different. It's absolutely different, even 24 hours after the game, because the emotional element has been removed. You can look at it far more clearly. And I'm looking at things like what you've just mentioned there, three at the back, right? Weren't we all screaming for that when Martin O'Neill was in charge? I'm pretty sure we were. You're right.
And Brendan.
And Brendan, aye, because we were sick to the back teeth of things not changing and things being so rigid. So when I look at it, though, I am wondering, and this might come with time with him assessing the players, getting to know the players and their abilities better. I'm wondering if it's the best personnel. Actually, I think maybe that's the issue. I'm going to ask you, because he's obviously got a lineup, and I'm not saying it isn't working at this stage, but see, in terms of having the three at the back, right? I think Trusty's still playing well. I think he found his form under Martin O'Neill, and he's still playing well. I don't think he's had a game where you're thinking he's had a stinker. There was a couple of occasions in the first half yesterday where it was his pace and his last-minute tackling that made sure that we had the clean sheet. Kieran Tierney, left-sided central defence. I can take it. I don't think it's his best position. I think he's at his best in that area where he scores his goal yesterday, where he's overlapping. some of his assists this season have been tremendous, Quinny. So maybe he's the left wing back. I don't know. And then I'm looking at the right-hand side and I'm thinking, well, I love Tony Ralston. You know that, right? And I don't actually think Tony had a particularly bad game yesterday. A couple of chances that could have nestled into the net. But he's not a right-sided centre-back for me. I think Donovan comes in and shows that in terms of an overlapping full-back or a wing-back, if you want to call it that, I think he's brilliant. I mean, all season I've been thinking that, Quinny, and even to the point where he's been dropped a couple of times and I'm thinking that's really unfair because he's done so well. This is a guy in Colby Donovan who was very close to signing for Scott Brown's Ayr United this season. Bruni told us that a couple of weeks ago. And then the injury happens to AJ. So I'm looking at the players and I'm thinking, right, maybe once Nancy gets to know the intricacies of his squad, he will come to the conclusion that perhaps the back three is the right thing, but the personnel's not right. Perhaps the wing backs are right, but the personnel isn't. And it's a case of maximising what you've already got at your disposal. But of course, the big January window is looming as well, Quinny.
Yeah, I think like the domestically, like it will work for us really quickly, really well. The question will be taking it up a level in Europa League or Champions League further and beyond, if that's the sort of place we find ourselves under Nancy in the fullness of time. But I really like Trusty in like the sweeper position because he's basically just sweeping up in and behind, doesn't he? I really do like him, and I think if you just put the back three that we seen yesterday, you put AJ in there for Ralston, it probably looks and feels really good. And then if you can keep a hold of AJ, Alistair Johnson, the only player you're probably really thinking about upgrading is Trusty, potentially, because again, Tierney, I think all Celtic fans are not going to want to see him out the team. Maybe you want him in a different position. Maybe that's something to think about, perhaps. But yeah, I like the back three a lot. And I think for once we can get really good at it, high level defensively, Nancy, the way he kind of builds the team out, you're not really leaving the wide areas that free. We spend a lot of time in the wide areas and a lot of players end up out there, So, coming into the game, I said on my pre-match, like I thought, and there was a bit of fear in the chat that Aberdeen would have hammered it down the left, tried to get at Ralston, tried to catch spaces, and they did. But there was always like a Celtic player there, or there was just no space for Aberdeen to run into. In the first 10 minutes, like Aberdeen they were terrible. Like, and I think we made them look terrible in a lot of ways, where they just couldn't mark us. The balls were going into places they couldn't deal with. And then when they thought, right, we've got the ball, this is what we'll do. Oh no, it didn't work because we had somebody covering there, or it had been kind of telegraphed, or that sort of thing. So I really like the three at the back, and I think it should give us it's a knock-on effect, I think, for the rest of the team, because for 99% of our matches, we don't need defenders. You know what I mean? Really, we need people going forward. And I know Aberdeen were 10 men and not a great team overall. I do like their team on paper, but again, it's not played on paper, is it? But that was a really good test of a normal match, league game, negative side. They're going to protect the box. They're not going to give you much away. And there's going to be a game of few chances. So seeing it work in that setting gives me way more belief that it will work against Livingston's and Motherwell's and these types of teams. And still have question marks over the top matches or the hardest matches, but I think the back three is something that, again, we've all seen at different stages. Should at least have been an option that we had available to us, but now it's plan A.
I think, obviously, we've got injuries as well, and this is another thing. You've got two players running about with black eyes yesterday. They've been through the wars, right? This is another thing that you just think, you don't even focus on it a great deal. But if you're looking at a full strength squad, you're maybe, for me, I would say my best back three, they would all be central defenders for me, Quinny, right? And it would be Trusty, Scales, and CCV if everybody's fit. And we know that CCV's out long term. Then when I'm thinking of wing backs, like you say, 99% of the time we are playing in the final third of the park. I think that we're exposed, and I think that was something that was capitalised on by Dundee United and Aberdeen, and it's a worry because our wing backs don't have the defensive qualities that we would expect. But Tierney and Donovan do. And they are equally as comfortable in the final third as they are in our own defensive third. And I think that once that clicks, or maybe once we get another central defender that we can slot into the right, centre-back position, and then when AJ comes back, he can take over from young Donovan. And I think Donovan's done really well, but AJ is the first choice, of course. Then I'm much more happy that once we're under the caution, if there's a breakaway, Tierney and AJ or Tierney and Donovan can get back and give that additional cover at the back. The right-hand side of the central defence is more of a concern for me. That's why Ralston's playing there. I found it interesting that Simpson Pusey made a very rare appearance again on the bench. And I do think that if he's a player that's got any kind of ability about him, and he must have, to be playing at the level of Manchester City first team, he's not a guy that's just came out the academy. He has got first team experience and Champions League experience with Man City. He's maybe a better bet. He maybe is a better bet on the right-hand side of defence, because I'm a great believer, Quinny, in playing guys where they're best fitted. Because as much as I love Ralston, and as I say, he got into 2 decent areas yesterday and he had 2 shots, etc., I don't think he's comfortable playing in that position, So what I was saying there about looking back and being able to look at it with a fresh perspective, I've been thinking a lot about this, Quinny, right? I'm thinking about adversity. And we're in a bit of adversity at the moment, right? As a football club. I'm not talking about a fan base and how the fan base, because we're the guys that get the hard time. Every time we don't lose a game and we have something to say about it, or there's a protest, they guys just don't know how to lose, man. They're spoiled, they're entitled, etc., etc. I'm talking about as a football club, right? The 2 times in most recent years of adversity were when we were going for 10 in a row, and this season, and nobody's got to tell me otherwise, because we've switched the managers. We're now on manager number 3 of this season, right? So this is a season of adversity. We've never lost 4 games in a row since 1978. It's one of these seasons, right? And I'm asking you the question, right? See, when you're so successful, and we have become that club domestically, we have become that club. We're so successful and so dominant that it's normalised. Now, I'm not saying I take it for granted, but it's normal that Celtic are successful. And I think that's a good thing in many ways, because it sets the standards for anybody coming at the football club. This is a culture. It's a mentality of win, right? Yep. But I also think that you can start coasting in all walks of life, by the way, Quinny, right? Whereby you're the best, you're winning, and you start coasting. And there's lots of wee things behind the scenes aren't really getting looked after. And there's lots of departments behind the scenes that are coasting, no doing the best that they could do. I'm talking recruitment. I'm talking the football department, the academy, communications, PR, media, all the things in the stadium, all the things that we talk about all the time. Throw in a bit of adversity, Quinny, and Celtic as a football club don't know how to deal with it. Look at the season where we were going for the 10. And I'm talking, right, okay, so we panic. We panic as a football club. We don't know how to behave. We send our team to Dubai. We come back and we justify it. We send the manager out for a press conference. He falls out with everybody in the room. It's always the fans that get it tight. But as a football club, Quinny, I don't think we are very good at dealing with adversity. This season is the exact same. We go into an AGM and we're getting told to behave. It gets called off early. We can't deal with it. It's like everybody's running about with their hair on fire at the moment, right? And I do think it's because you start to coast when you're successful, and a lot of the things that just kind of sort themselves out because you're winning on the park then get this focus, and people aren't used to the focus and the magnifying glass on them. What are you doing? You're not doing your job properly. All of a sudden, the CEO's getting it, the CFO. I just don't think that this football club's very good at dealing with that.
Yeah, I think so too. Sorry, I've got some kids
great use. That's a skill. See the mute button. That is a skill.
Talking about handling adversity. No, I do agree with that. I think, the thing with fans and expectation, I was thinking as you were talking there, again, any football fan will kind of know this to be true, right? But like Real Madrid fans expect to win the Champions League every year. Now, they don't win it every year. They kind of got close a few years ago. They kind of did win it every year for a while. But that is the pressure that comes with that club. If they don't win the league, they're not really that bothered. Yeah, they like to and stuff, but if they're not getting to semi-finals and finals and such, and the club there, like, how do they respond to that? They don't attack the fans and go, chill out, we've won the league, or chill out, like we got to the semi-finals. They accept that this is the pressure that comes with this club. This club is expected to do these things because of the history it has, the prestige it has in with the game, and the identity that the fans have with it. So when it comes to like Celtic being in that kind of vein of like, oh, we're kind of in the mode of success era at the moment, we expect to do well. It's again, if Real Madrid fans didn't have that expectation, do they win 3 Champions Leagues in a row? I'm going to suggest that they wouldn't have. And I would argue as well the same thing could be said about Celtic, that if us as fans didn't have these standards and push things, some of the success we would have had over the years wouldn't have happened. It's actually an interesting point I kind of stumble into with you here, right? Because I make you quite right for, I think the 10 in a row season, or the would-be, they did panic, and I think like it was like keep Ayer, keep Edward, keep Cham, and then to be fair to them, and do you know what? See in the summer, I know we're on a real tangent, I'm sorry everyone, but see that summer, I took a real step back and I went, do you know what? Fair play Celtic, because we spent money that summer. Like we spent a lot of money. We really tried to not mess about, buy guys that were like had a pedigree of sorts of, so there was all wildly poorly spent, Jetties and Barcasses and Duffys and all the rest of it. But they did try it. They did really try and push the boat out. Some of the signings were done earlier in the window, and it obviously ended up backfiring. And anyway, I kind of thought on that point that, see if you kind of fast forward a little bit, they did see the panicking and the kind of changing of strategy. See if you went back a few years, me and you were chatting about this, I think, after a show the other day. But see if Celtic didn't try and like broaden its horizons, and over the last couple of years, if it did just focus on signing the likes of Hickeys and Miller and even, and I'm not saying he would be the number one striker or anything like that, right? But even something like Martin Boyle or whatever, if Celtic had kept up a little bit of that signing pattern, maybe even, no, maybe not for the 10 in a row season, right? But in some of the windows we've had gone by, we wouldn't have spent money on Odenholm. We wouldn't have spent money on Kwon. We wouldn't have spent money on, take your list of guys, Yeah. And I'm kind of all over the place. I'm really sorry. But when the expectation is for us to dominate domestically, there's a bit of an ingredient that goes into that, of having guys that, like Luke McKeown showed really well, in any period I think he's been at Celtic. Domestically, you can rely on that guy. He's going to do what he's relying to do. And again, if you maybe even want to flavour this into the Johnny Kenny conversation, Johnny Kenny we are trying to figure out if he can work at this situation rather than buying somebody else in the league that's done it. And we know, right, that guy fits, he works, he scores 20 goals a season for, Miovski or something like that. And I wasn't a Miovski guy, by the way. I didn't actually want us to sign him, but Lennon Miller, blah, 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 blah. We could have done a bit of that. So in terms of the scrutiny, the pressure, the fan expectation, it's part of the identity of different football teams. And to hide from
100%, 100%.
To hide from it, you're kind of denying what the thing is, and that's the thing I think it really upsets us. I'll stop talking because I know I've went on for quite a bit, right? But that's the main thing that upsets us about I think the club, the board, and all the kind of failings, is that their response is kind of, it kind of flies in the face of everything that we know to be true. It's like, like they're saying black, we're saying white with some things, and that's where the friction comes from.
No, you're 100% right. You've used the word I've written down here, identity, right? And I want to talk about that, Quinny, because it's so important. I think it's so important to Celtic. And I think that in the modern day where, there's going to eventually be a belief system that data and AI could pick you the best 11 players on the planet that could come and play for your football team. And some of that information will be right, but not all of it, because there's some unquantifiable things about people, nature, personalities, character. And it absolutely bleeds into football. It bleeds into all sports. And it comes to the point where when the chips are down, for example, how to find a win when it doesn't look likely. And I think that comes into a bit of mentality, of course, but the identity of your team, the makeup of your team. And I think a team like Celtic has always had a nucleus of talent that not only have the ability, Quinny, but they have the connection to Celtic Football Club, and it gives us our identity. I mean, we're talking today, we will talk about a guy like James Forrest, who scores in his 17th consecutive season for Celtic. Only one player in the past has scored in more consecutive seasons, Jimmy McMenemy. A book was written about Jimmy McMenemy by the late David Potter. Go and check it out. This guy was just a freak of nature way back when, we didn't play as many games as we did now, when he scores in 18 consecutive seasons. And Jamesy Forrest, I don't know if he'll be around next season, but he is the evergreen. As there's green shoots of progress, he's the evergreen Jamesy Forrest. The identity of Celtic is so important. And I think that when you're going through a process, and this is always my concern, of bringing in huge amounts of players every season, I think you can lose a bit of that, right? Because my big issue in season number 1 under Brendan in his second term, the Odenholm and Kwon transfer window that you mentioned there, was the fact that we bring in like 9 or 10 players and not many of them hit the ground running. right? And not many of them are still at the football club. And what then develops is a situation where you're in a dressing room or on a training park where most of the guys there are unhappy, and it's a third of your squad. And then they might have, let's say, people who are from the same country start to home in and saying, right, you're my mate, we're going to go and find restaurants and spend time together. Before you know it, the 9 or 10 unhappy players, that can bleed into another wee group of players, and then cliques can develop. I think it can be very damaging. You've got to be very careful about constantly just try to buy yourself out of trouble. And your identity, whilst we don't have a good enough academy, and we don't, because the results show that we don't, the identity sometimes can come back to the football club with people who understand Celtic, the history, the heritage, the fabric of the football club. It may not have come through the ranks. You know, McCowan's a classic example just now, but I think there's other players that we've missed out on who could have been doing a brilliant job for Celtic domestically. We've taken our eye off that ball. I'm going to bring in Paul Elliot again from last night. It's not a shameless plug. I've got nothing to sell. All right, it's Paul Elliot. And I'm not being funny, right? I over the years, Quinny, I have been privileged and honoured, and it is a privilege to share a stage with so many incredible talents, right, in the world of football, unbelievable players and managers, and Martin O'Neill being one of the best. And I was on a stage last night where I basically was an observer. I was a spectator. Paul Elliot, I've never shared the stage with someone who can speak so powerfully as this human being. He spoke about racism, diversity. He spoke about the connection that he feels with a Celtic fan base. He spoke about what the board should do to hold out the olive branch to the Celtic support. Virtually everything he said was met with cheers and applause, Connie. And I'm not overreacting here. Anybody who was at the gig, jump into the comments. Let us know what kind of night you had. It was a different night. It wasn't about the funnies. And they're great. They're brilliant nights. You need a few of them, right? It wasn't about that. It was so emotional. And he hit the spot time and time and time again. We had someone in the audience called Jerry who set up the Paul Elliot CSC in Irvine all those years ago. And him and his boy were in the room. And his boy had written down a question for the second half, you know. Obviously, is he aware of the CSC? And is he also aware, listen to this, is he also aware that Sinbad out of Brookside is an honorary member? Don't ask me the circumstances behind that. So anyway, we get Jerry, reluctantly, we get Jerry to come up to the stage. And because of the size difference, Jerry steps up to the stage and Elliot steps down and they're the same size. It was a beautiful moment. But as an orator, as a speaker, as a public speaker, a motivational speaker, the guy is off the scale. Now, in terms of football or business conferences or whatever, or in work environments, I have never seen someone speak like this and hold a room the way that Paul Elliot did. And I'm looking at Paul Elliot and I'm thinking, over the years, Quinny, you come into contact with people you think you'd be brilliant for our football club and you've got a connection to the club. Not a jobs for the boys scenario. And who have I mentioned before? I've mentioned John Collins. I've mentioned Brian McClare, Jackie McNamara, people who could bring something tangible to the football department side. You know, Paul Elliot. Paul Elliott's an executive. Paul Elliot is, honestly, he could go toe-to-toe with any of our board members. And he was saying the connection has to be rekindled between the fans and the board. And I was thinking about this, Quinn. I'm going to throw it to you. I don't think it's controversial. It's controversial that nothing's been done. There was an image captured. There was a couple of images captured. We could give you a timeline. Celtic are playing Dundee United. Emotions are high, right? Peter Lawwell has resigned 2 hours before the game. And in the directors area, there's a couple of Celtic staff members who are not on the board, but the board members that are sitting there are the interim chairman, Brian Wilson, Chris Mackay, chief financial officer, and CEO, Michael Nicholson. They're standing together, and there's a few other Celtic employees around about them. And there's an image. It's a horrible image. And it's you know, I think it could be his parting image of Chris Mackay filming the Celtic fans on his phone. It looks terrible, right? It looks terrible. Yeah. And they're getting dogs abuse. And at some point, somebody's got fake notes and they throw the fake notes. It's like throwing confetti. Do you get done for assault at a wedding for throwing confetti at someone? I mean, come on. People are just losing their minds over this, right? And then the Celtic fans are pointing at the board, Quinny. And at the moment a photograph is taken, the lad's finger, I'm saying it's a lad, he's got a hood up, I'm not sure if it's a male or a female, he's pointing at the board. That's not a crime. But the way that the finger then joins onto the high vis of the policeman's jacket, the story has ran that the guy is pointing a blade at the board. And he's not. Anyone with any sense, just zoom into the picture. You can see the buckle of the guy's handcuffs. You see the black of his body armor, and then you see this wee high vis. It's not a blade. It is 100% not a blade. Now, it's been ran. It's been ran in national titles as a story. Celtic blade wielding maniac. And the mainstream media, Quinny, this is me on my soapbox. I'll get off it in a wee second. The mainstream media who are welcome at Celtic Park, whereas fans who just so happen to blog and vlog are not welcome. The mainstream media have jumped on this story, right? They've destroyed that guy's reputation, whoever he is, right? I think there's a legal question around this in the future if the guy wants to proceed with that. And what have the club done? Remain silent. They've remained silent. This is a Celtic fan. Yes, he's shouting at the board. Yes, he's frustrated like many of us are at the board. But this is a Celtic fan who is being absolutely targeted, not only by the police, who apparently are investigating the pointing of a finger, right? But also the mainstream media, Quinny. And I think there is an opportunity. And if anyone with any kind of PR nous at that football club, right, if anyone exists at that football club, they should see this as an opportunity to say, wait a minute, we're going to stand up for the Celtic support here. We're going to read the room. This is wrong. He's being targeted. This is wrong. And yeah, we've got our differences and they will be resolved in the fullness of time. But see, right now, the club need to step up, Quinny, and say, this is wrong. We stand up for this Celtic supporter. And we are looking for retractions here. We're looking for apologies here. Our fans don't go to stadiums with knives and threaten people, right? And I think that they should do it because it's the right thing to do, Quinny, but also under the circumstances and where we find ourselves, it would be the ideal opportunity to start some kind of dialogue with the fans and say, look, we don't hate you, because a lot of us think at the moment that they do. They don't want to talk to us. They chuck us out to AGMs. Let's resolve this. I think this could be day one of resolution. Will it happen? People in the comments will be thinking I'm mad for even suggesting it. I think it's an opportunity, Quinny.
I agree with you, it's an opportunity, but I would also agree with the comments. You're mad if you think it's going to happen. That Chris Mackay photo is like it's worth 1,000 words, isn't it? Like, that's not a guy that likes Celtic. That's not a guy that likes Celtic fans. Like, and you know, I even seen like, I don't know if it was in defense of him or whatever, but I did see some of the replies to it, like, oh, he's taking pictures so he knows who to ban, or that he's doing it for security or something like that or whatever, which I think is wild to even give him that as an out. It's like when you see his face in that picture, like, you've seen a guy make that face somewhere in your life, and you know that he's looking at people going, "You're effing idiots. I know better than you. You're these are clowns. These are beneath me, and I'm going to make a mockery of you. I'm taking this picture. I'm taking this video of you, whatever it is." And it really does tell. Whereas with Nicholson, like, I think Nicholson is kind of like, he's just above his station, I think. You know, like, we've kind of maybe spoke about that before, like what a CEO is, kind of personality type or whatever. But that Mackay, and even some of the stuff that came out in the minutes from the collective meeting, and I know you spoke on it directly, it's like, it's not even passive aggressive, but it's like, you know, like, it's confrontational. All of the responses to stuff, everything he says is confrontational. It's defending a position, it's justifying. There's no, you know, like, oh yeah, the club could have done better with that, or, you know, there's none of that stuff going around. So I don't think they've got it in their head, let's get back in the same team. They've got it in their head, like, this is our team, and if you're no in it, deal with it, you know. And again, they act like, in terms of this attitude and this sort of stuff, the thing that always gets my wick is they act like it's a startup company, you know, like, and you've mentioned this before in your own way as well, like, it didn't get founded in, you know, 19 or 2000 or whatever these people took over in. But that's the way they act. It's like, we started coming up from scratch and we are bloody cursed to have you guys as customers. You know what I mean? Like, we wish it's like, it's a surprise. The Celtic fans support Celtic, and we want to win the league, and we want to be in the Champions League, and we want to have a good academy, and we want, you know, the club to be the best it can. It's somehow a surprise, you know. And
it's the inheritance. It's the inheritance of that success that gets to me. You know, you're right. It wasn't a startup. And by the way, this is the thing, when Peter Lowell stepped down as chairman, as well as where we are right now, you've also, and we said this at the time, you've also got to look at the success that we've had financially as a football club since he came in to look at the finances, because that's what he came in. That was his role at the time. Non-footballing matters, incidentally. And I just think in time, when you start to coast and you get the ego and you get the confidence and everything else, then you start to have more influence at a football club than you should. And I think that change has to happen. That's why, for me, when you've got people who are 20 and 24 years on the board, Quinny, that's not healthy. You need new ideas. You absolutely need, even like, you look at the scale of Acsom, you look at the amount of people who have contributed over the years and how that changes, and you've got the nucleus, if you like, of guys that never change. They're there and they're always there, and you've got other people who come and they go, and I think it creates a freshness of ideas, a diversity of opinion, and we don't have that in the boardroom. And I'm not just using this as a platform to have a dig at the board today. I think I'm delighted. I'm always delighted when Celtic win. Absolutely. The mood is completely different when Celtic win a game of football. So thank you, the football gods, for that. We've touched on the defence. I now want to talk about the attacking aspect, Quinny. Like you do yourself many times, I'll rewatch the game this morning. £10 PPV yesterday, by the way, Celtic TV, and we got a half-time bit of entertainment of the women's team wrapping Christmas presents. Thanks for that cutting-edge content at Celtic's media team. And I watched it again today, and the chances we created was quite unbelievable. I mean, we hit the woodwork 5 times. We were cutting them open. Their goalie had an inspired performance other than the daft pass that ended up with the defender getting sent off. And yeah, I agree with many of the comments saying this could have been a 7 or an 8-1. Like, I've seen Celtic beating Aberdeen 9-0 at Parkhead. It could have been one of their days. It could easily, the semi-final of the Scottish a couple of seasons ago, where we beat them 6-0, or last season when we hammered them 6-0. So we can do that to a team. We can do that to a Jimmy Tilleen Aberdeen team. It didn't happen yesterday, and the question I'm asking is why? Now, there's a simple answer to that, but I want your take on this. The simple answer is we don't have a striker. And I was looking at the strikers and I'm saying, right, again, doing that thing where propel yourself 3 months ahead. Let's be balanced about this. Is that Nancy's fault? No. So I think we're doing everything right up until the point that you've got this 30-goal a season striker putting the ball in the net. And we've been spoilt for strikers. I mean, our record with strikers has been quite incredible. Now, Mader's not that guy this season. And he never was a centre forward. I mean, he had an amazing patch, an amazing period playing there. But he's much better, I think, in his preferred position. So what we're running with at the moment is Kenny and Shin. And who's injured? Osmond, right, legitimate, because Martin O'Neill made him legitimate, I think, by playing him, and Iheanacho. And I asked myself, and it might just be because of the green tinted specs and all the rest of it, would we be better with the 2 injured guys than the 2 fit guys? Maybe. We've spoken about Kenny quite a bit. I think in the last 2 games he's missed too many chances, Quinny. But I've got to say, whether you fancy him or not as a manager, that's not really Nancy's fault. It's not like he's playing somebody out of position at centre forward. He's playing our only fit striker, plus a guy who's not really played many games as the backup now. We're missing Iheanacho, we're missing Osmond. It's not really Nancy's fault. So I think I've got to be fair in that. We're creating all the chance. We just need that killer instinct. Is it as simple as that, Quinny?
Yeah, I think so. I was a wee bit late coming on because I'd just finishing up my own video that we out this afternoon, like kind of breaking it down and everything. And I think like Kenny, like he's not number 1 Celtic striker. I think we can all see that's maybe not within his potential level. But I think from what we've seen with him under Martin O'Neill, and even from what we've seen in the Aberdeen game, like I don't really have a problem with him being striker number 3 in the squad or something like that. You know, the problem is like now when there's no one fit and you kind of do need him, he's coming up short. But again, looking back over the highlights, like you talk about Mitov's bad pass, that comes from Johnny Kenny at the press. You know, he kind of creates that chance, which ends up coming back to him. And there's a few sequences like that where it's probably the thing that would stop me playing Negren up front right now with all the injuries that are going on, because Kenny does cover ground really quickly and he does really go after it. And in absence of having a finisher, that's not a bad. I'm kind of just walking into this as we're talking, but it's kind of like having Kenny Miller up front again, isn't it? In a way, a guy that will run all day, but can he hit the back of the net? Mm-hmm. So like Kenny's been taking a lot of flack, and I've heard a lot of kind of criticism saying like you shouldn't be playing professional football in League of Ireland and all the rest of it. I think that's a bit harsh. Like I really do, because like it's not as if like again. We've watched lots of Celtic, and I think Engels has been quite a divisive player. And the thing with Engels sometimes is Where was he? Did he play? What did he do? What was his role? And he can get lost in matches. Kenny's not really there, where he's like lost in the game. He's not up to speed. He's just a bit off the pace. His finishes against, was it Dundee? Bad choice, bad technique, bad composure, whatever you want to attribute it to. But and again, if you want to think about the way Nancy's been talking, it's very much process over outcome. If you look at all those highlights from the Aberdeen game, yes, Johnny Kenny's missed enough chances to get us some more points and all the rest of it. But if you're a manager looking at process over outcome, you'll look at Johnny Kenny and say he'll score goals. Like he will. He will get a few. He's already got a few this year. Will he get past 10? Who knows? Probably not, especially if we sign somebody and recruit in. But if we had a better striker, if we had someone that was a bit more off the shelf ready, of course we would have scored more goals. And I think the Aberdeen game, the Dundee United game, maybe even Hearts would have been totally different. Because even think about Iheanacho, how good he looked before he got injured. It's quite clear that it was like having an extra man in the team up front. A guy that could hold the ball, play in. And we're definitely missing that. Don't get it twisted. I'm not saying like Kenny should be starting every week. We don't need a striker, but I think the criticism of Kenny, it's kind of like Scales, I think, from a year ago or so, where it's like, what are you asking of this guy, really? Like he's got 4 goals this season. If he finishes on 7 or 8, it's a pretty good year for Johnny Kenny. And I hate the phrase, it's not his fault when you're talking about a player. It just doesn't make sense to me. He's playing football. It's all his fault. He's deciding to do this. But yeah, like we need a better striker. Yeah.
We do. And I think the reason I'm bringing it up isn't to have a dig at Johnny Kenny or indeed Shinya Yamada. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think the reason I'm bringing it up is trying to be as fair as I can to Nancy and say, look, right, I would actually say he's not playing the best players in the defensive area. I don't think he's playing the best wing backs. I don't think he's playing 3 centre halves, which he should. But up top, he's playing the only guy he can play, really. I mean, anybody else telling me that Shinya Yamada should start that game, I'll argue the toss around that, because I've seen nothing, and I mean zero, from Shinya Yamada to suggest that he's a Celtic striker. And I agree with you. I think Iheanacho's been really seriously unlucky. What I loved about his attitude when he came on in Europe and then the League Cup final was the fact that he was the guy trying to rouse his teammates into, wake up, we need to win this game. There's a moment where it zoomed into him and he's standing at the kind of doors of the tunnel at Hampden because he's gutted because he's been injured, Quinny, and he's punching walls and all that. And there was another moment, I think it was in Motherwell game, where he's up and down the touchline. He's been taking off up and down the touchline celebrating goals. I like Iheanacho. I think he'll be somebody that will have something to say this season. I think he'll score important goals between now and the end of the season. There's question marks over his fitness, of course there is. I hope that in terms of the scouting, this takes us a wee bit off the beaten track here. In terms of the scouting of a new striker, you would expect, Quinny, for us to already be at a stage where we have our targets. Right, okay. So Nancy comes into the equation and you say to yourself, right, we've already got our targets. This guy wants to be very specific in the way that his team has a shape and how we play. Does that change our targets? Does he then look at it and say, well, you've got these guys here that maybe you were interested in 6 or 12 months ago and you're going to go back in for one of them. He's not really my guy. I would rather bring in this type of a player. How do you see that working? Because obviously we know the links between Nancy and Tisdale. We've gone on and about it, right? We know that, Ampadu worked with Paul Tisdale at Exeter City for 4 years of Paul Tisdale's 12 years. They know each other. Obviously, through that connection, he'll be aware of Nancy. Nancy comes in. Tisdale's the guy who's in the head of the football operations. He is the talent spotter. That's what he is. He's currently on holiday, which I find, I'm going to say unusual. I find it unusual, right? Maybe I'm cynical. And I know I'm cynical. I am cynical. Absolutely, right? When something happens, I always say, all right, what's the real meaning behind that? Is he on holiday? Is this happened after the cup final, Quinny, where Tisdale has been attacked? He's been grabbed by the throat, to be more specific, right? By someone. I don't know who. And whether or not it's been investigated, I don't know. And I'm the kind of person, Quinny, that if somebody's done something wrong, deal with it. Absolutely. But the guy in the crowd at Tannadice wasn't doing anything wrong. You're in a football crowd. You scream, you shout, you jump up and down, you sing songs, you do things you don't do in normal life. If you did that in your house today, your missus might be a bit concerned about you. But in a football stadium, it's okay, right? And he's pointing his finger. That's okay as well. But if somebody's attacked Paul Tisdale outside the ground, that's not okay. That's absolutely deplorable behaviour, right? And I've heard it from a source who was there and seen it, that that's what happened, and they grabbed him by the throat. Is he on holiday? Because I actually think this could be a really serious issue. If, for example, Quinny, he stopped, I never signed up to this, guys. I'm off ski. Because if that was the case, timing wise, I cannot see the club putting that out there, because again, that goes back to running about with your hair on fire. We don't deal with adversity. The ship is sinking. Lowell's out the door and Tisdale's out the door. So even if it happens, I don't think we'll find out about it right now.
No, my first thought when I seen it as well was it's either like gross incompetence, or it's that thing where when people are leaving a job, they take all their holidays before they leave. So they don't work, but they get paid. Then they've got gardening leave, or then they've got their whatever. So that was the two train of thoughts I had. I kind of forgot about it until you brought it back up. But thinking about it, yeah, maybe as the latter rather than the former, you know. But again, Celtic are being really pedestrian. If that's the case, if we're letting this guy cash his holidays in before sacking him or he resigns or whatever, and we've not got a football doctor. We need a new doctor of football in the building, but we're not, because the guy's on holiday. Then we need to deal with the police investigator or whatever. Then we're probably just leaving it all up to Nancy, and that will probably take us into one of two ways. He'll either do, if you guys remember when like Ange got the Tottenham job, he didn't really buy anyone from us. I don't think we maybe feared one or two players, but for him, it was kind of like, oh, brilliant. I can kind of sign anyone now. And he went out and he went to the Bundesliga and he went around Europe and bought some really big players that we would have never been able to afford, so Nancy maybe does that, but he comes here and he's like, oh, brilliant. I can buy all these players that would have never went to MLS.
Yeah.
Or he'll do what Ange did when he actually came to us, and he'll go back to MLS and he'll get a few gems on the cheap and bring them in. So if that is the case, I probably don't really mind Nancy. Like, just, you know, the system. Yeah, I think you need a bit of a translator for like European standards. He's also got a wee bit of the grips of like domestically and stuff like that. But it should be maybe not by committee, but you know, there should still be someone that understands like, oh, well, guys that have shown this before didn't work well in the league or didn't translate well to the squad, and things like this did and didn't, you know, maybe add a bit of that into the equation. So I'd be happy for Nancy to really steer the ship on the key signings. But I think one thing that will stay consistent with Celtic is that there will still be club signings. There will still be guys brought in for $500,000 that you've never heard of from a league that you don't follow. And there'll still be random guys on loan from Man City or Barca or wherever we're getting them from. But in terms of those key first team players, like, I really do hope it's Nancy that gets the autonomy out of it in any circumstance, not a Tisdale or a CFO.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think my concern comes from, because people might think, oh, you're speculating. And of course I am speculating. I just find it absolutely bizarre and absurd that someone takes their holiday right now when, you know, there's a January transfer window just around the corner. It's just absolutely, you know, it's self-harm in many, many ways. That's not something that you would be doing. And that's why I brought it up. And I might be completely wrong. And I'll take that if I'm wrong. It's not going to be the first time. But what actually happened between the tenures of Mark Lowell and Paul Tisdale's, we had this period, of course, didn't we, where we didn't have a head of football operations or a head of scouting and recruitment, as Mark Lowell was. And the guys who were doing all the running about and all the scouting and making all the decisions were actually Brendan Rodgers and Jay Lefebvre. As we know, he's now left the building. He's away to Swansea. So in terms of like even saying, right, who's your head of your scouting department? We'll bring him in and he'll have a bigger role to play. We don't have one. Yeah. We don't have one at the moment, because the last time when we didn't have a head of the department, we brought in the head of scouting and he helped the football manager. And I'm looking at Nancy thinking, you need help. Who do we go to? Where's the heads? Well, the only head at the moment is Tisdale within that department. So I'm pretty sure we'll find out in the fullness of time what the situation is. Let's bring in some of your comments. It's been a good one. 54 minutes in already. If Nancy is going to play three at the back, can we at least get big dominating centre backs instead of full backs playing at position? McMahon, I agree with you in terms of playing people into position. I just think that you know, in all sports, you can look like a world beater in your natural position, and then you go somewhere else and you look like a very ordinary player or vulnerable. You can look vulnerable. So we definitely need to get someone in place of Ralston for me. Michael Ross, and in actual fact, I wouldn't even play Tierney there. I've already said I think he's much better on the left wing back. Kyogo talk is lazy journalism. a few people have said this. I'm not sure from your side, Celtic here, etc., if you've reported on this, Quinny, but talk of Kyogo, Yang, Birmingham, maybe people just joining the dots and thinking that we could do a deal. And to hell with him, he wanted away. He did. He did want away. And sometimes people look at it as a personal slight on Celtic. Again, doing that thing where I'm jumping forward a few months and looking back. Maybe it was just him and the gaffer didn't get on, Quinny.
Could
Something
be
as simple as that.
Yeah, Kyogo is an icon, right, for his time at Celtic. Don't get me wrong, right? But I've never been mad for him. Like I think, I don't know. It felt like Dyson and a few of the other guys were a bit happier after he was gone, is kind of part of it. And I also think, like, I don't think we want him back from Birmingham. Like, why? Like, to help him. It's not really going to help us. He's like 30 now.
What's he done since he left Celtic?
Yeah. And yeah, I don't want to speak bad of him because he scored so many good goals, and especially as Rangers won titles and stuff like that. But yeah, I think you're remembering all the good stuff and not some of the other stuff that we got from Kyogo. Kyogo had just as many sitters missed as he had goals, especially towards the end of it. And again, like I was seeing, like, see when James Forrest scores and when Tierney scores, next time you're looking at the highlights, look at Yamada. That was Kyogo every time. See if he wasn't scoring, see if he wasn't involved in it. There wasn't always mad celebrations from him. He wasn't always like pure happy for the team. He took himself over the team quite often in front of goal, Kyogo, and that's something I felt anyway. And yeah, I don't want players like that. I want players like, again, if you go back and watch the highlights, Negren, McKeown, and McGregor, none of them are rapid, but you know what? You can't touch them. They were linking up, they were popping into spaces, playing it down the alleyway for someone else like Maeda or whatever. That's the sort of guys you need in modern football, especially this type of team that it's about the system first. Like, see if you look at that chance that Negren plays Kenny on the penalty spot that he shanks wide. Negren has every right to shoot there. It's on his left foot. The goal's opened up. The keeper's like off his line. Doesn't even think. Set the striker up. One touch pass hitting to him. Again, not a great example for the Kyogo thing, if you get me. But he was an icon. He was great while he was here. But yeah, chapter's closed.
Chapter's closed. You're talking Negren there. One thing I would point out is his goal scoring record. He's a player now who's actually got 8 goals and 5 assists, Quinny. So 129 minutes is his return rate. So every 129 minutes, he will be involved in a goal, either by setting it up or scoring it himself. Johnny Kenny is sitting on 5 goals this season and 1 assist. So he's got 137. So Negren's got a better return than Johnny Kenny. Will he get any double figures this season? If he sticks around, I would say probably will, Johnny. Would Nawrocki be a better fit in this back three? Again, I'm going to go back to manager v player. It didn't work with Brendan Rodgers, did it, Jungle Line? See, if I'm a manager, if it was doable, I know that Home comes back on the 31st of December. That's when his deal runs out. Guys like Nawrocki, Palmer, I'm not sure about Montgomery. They guys are to the end of the season. I would like to have a look at all my players. I would, because you just never know. You can breathe life into somebody else's career that another manager couldn't get a tune out of them. Quinny, I've seen it so many times. Yeah. I would like to have a look at them, but it might be beyond us. We might not have that option to cut the deal short, Quinny.
I think the Palmer one you could probably make happen, because I don't think Polish teams have got much money, and I think, like, if you maybe said to them, "We'll pay you a termination fee," they'd probably just take the money. So I don't mind it on the principle, like, give Nancy the chance to look at everyone. Welsh is too injury prone, but like, I can imagine Scales being sold by Nancy. JSP's only on loan. Dane Murray, who knows how his future goes, so like, Welsh, Nawrocki, a few of these guys could be the bench centre backs, under Nancy, perhaps, and there was a midfielder I was just thinking about as well. It's just fell at the back of my mind, a Celtic player. Maybe I'm just getting confused. But there was a comment I did want to come back here on the Kyogo thing, talking about Kyogo missing sitters or whatever. Honestly, if you look at Kyogo's time, Kyogo didn't score 100 goals for Celtic. He scored goals, he scored big goals, he scored quality goals, scored screamers, but he wasn't a guy that scored every week. Like, and anyone that thinks he was is just remembering it wrong. I don't want to be any, blunt in that. But I think Nawrocki, Palmer, all these guys definitely could get another look in. I think Nawrocki is maybe the only one that, if you were to terminate somebody in January and bring them back in, you would do it for, because of the defence balance that we're still looking to strike. I think he got injured last week, though. I don't think he played at the weekend. Naroki, so watch out for that. But he's been doing very, very well in Bundesliga 2. So if Nancy sees his stat pack from what he's been doing up to this point, Bundesliga 2 is on Christmas break, he'll probably be really interested in talking to the guy.
See, going back to Kyogo, because it's, you know what, I actually just think it's speculation, right? It was called lazy journalism there by the commenter. If you look at his record when we signed him, it was 50 goals in 111 games. So more or less one every couple of games. And it comes to Celtic, he scores 85 and 165. So pretty much the same, really, if you want to look at average, right? He had that one season, didn't he, where he scores 34 goals in 50 games. That was an incredible campaign. That was his second campaign. But since Rodgers came into the football club, it was 19 and 12. 19 and 12. So for your striker to score 12 goals.
And all comps. And all 60-game season.
Aye, you know. So he then leaves, and this is the bit that I would focus on, Quinny. He leaves, he scores 0 goals in Ligue 1 for Rennes, and he scores 1 goal in the Championship for Birmingham City. So I'd be looking at that, and like you say, don't think about all the good goals he scored against Rangers and all these little moments, which were fantastic, and I'm not going to airbrush them out of history. But you're maybe not getting that guy. You're maybe getting the guy who's struggling at Rennes and Birmingham. And then, you know, in terms of legacies, you're thinking, wait a minute, are there better strikers out there with no link to Celtic that we can bring in January? If the answer is yes, go and get them. Go and get them. So listen, that's been an hour, Quinny. Thank you very much for joining us. 3,000 live. It's on days like this, Quinny, that I say it and I'll say it again. We could run for 2 hours every single day. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Paul Elliot, I cannot speak highly enough about the guy. If he is doing anything in your area, go and watch him. He's unbelievable. He had the crowd in the palm of his hand. An absolute gentleman who, instead of going straight back to his hotel last night, went for a couple of jars in Gracie's with the Celtic fans. And who's also in Gracie's? Rab Douglas. This is just what happens on a Sunday night in Glasgow. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you to Quinny for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.